Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of UFO Undercover. Like Natasha says, I am your host, Joe Montaldo. I hope you're having a beautiful day on our beautiful blue planet, wherever you may be today. I mean, I say day, but, I know for a good chunk of my listeners that are in Australia, it's afternoon right now, so happy afternoon. Actually, it's Thursday afternoon. So I hope y'all are good. And for my friends out on the East Coast, it's about 8 o'clock now. For my friends in the UK, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. So for everybody who is stopping for lunch or staying up late or skipping dinner or even skipping our glorious Emperor's speech tonight, I want to thank all of y'all and welcome you to UFO Undercover. Tonight's guest is actually a friend of mine, and we talked quite a lot over the last few years. I consider him the father of modern exopolitics. I'm sure that's an arguable thing if I say that to the wrong people, but, I know most people would agree with me. His name is Alfred Webre. And if y'all don't know who he is by now, you must be a rookie to ufology is all I can say, or to exopolitics. Maybe I shouldn't use that ufology word because it always gets me in trouble. Alfred, how have you been?
I'm very, very well, and I just want to say that in the words of our former president, John F. Kennedy, victory has 1,000 fathers.
Well, I know we were talking just before the show about our emperor, because you're in Canada, so you ain't got to deal with the...
No. Listen, I am a dual citizen, both
that's true.
The U.S. and of Canada.
So you have to deal with
and also, the U.S. is a major world power, so whatever the U.S. does tends to set the agenda for a whole number of countries.
Yeah, well, as I had told a friend of mine 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago when Bush was still in office, he said, if the U.S. economy messes up, it's only going to affect the U.S. I said, dude, if the U.S. economy goes down, we're bringing a planet with us. Oh, no way. Well, of course, he found out he was wrong, and I was right when this last crash happened. But for me, and for most of the free world, and even the communist world, it matters who our sitting president is.
Sure.
Different.
And Joe, there's a physicist who actually I've met, who you may have known, who spent quite a bit of time up here in Vancouver, whose work now has been reviewed by peer review conferences in the area of quantum physics. And his name is Nassim Haramein. And his speciality is what he calls the singularity, which manifests as black holes, among his specialities. And later tonight, hopefully, we seem to be having some kind of internet problems now, but hopefully later tonight, we're going to be publishing at examiner.com. Your listeners can go to our website, which is at exopolitics.com, and our Examiner column will be linked there. If not, they just go to examiner.com and Google and just search for my name in there. And we're going to be posting it there, but there'll be a 10-minute video there of Nassim Haramein in a lecture giving the full quantum physics explanation and walking us through the pictures as these giant UFOs appear and then make some circular motions and then go back into the sun at about the 19th degree or so, and what he says is that what from his calculation, the sun serves as a singularity, or what they call a stargate, for access into this solar system, so that when extraterrestrial or interdimensional civilizations are wanting to access this solar system with spacecraft that are as large or larger than the Earth, that is, large-size spacecraft, they will use the singularity or the stargate that is located in the sun. His theory is that every sun has a black hole, just like every galaxy has a black hole. And of course now science, since 2005 and again in 2008, after a very long study, has confirmed the existence of a black hole at the center of our galaxy. That's about 4 million times across the size of our sun. So in this lecture, which we'll be publishing along with a complete scientific explanation, and we'll be putting it side by side with NASA's denials that the giant UFOs even exist, which they say are, what happened is our equipment just malfunctioned and you're not seeing anything there. And so it appears to us, and we'll be putting forward in this article, that we believe that physicist Nassim Haramein, which he does with a case study with prior giant UFOs around the sun from the NASA stereo spacecraft, in prior cases, that he has cracked the case. And he presents a very, very good argument that the sun, that these spacecraft are actually using the sun as there is a stargate in the sun which provides access to our solar system from any other place in the universe, which they can access then outside of time-space. And it's a fascinating way. I know that we are a relatively primitive culture, and we're just catching up on this.
Yeah, baby.
But he is considered to be one of the geniuses of quantum physics, and I think that he has been able to put together all of the pieces of the puzzle.
Well, I got to say, I found the photos to be fascinating. I didn't, when I was talking with Kevin about this, I was like, because I'm always been a very skeptical individual by nature. And when I seen them, the first couple, I was like, well, that could be anything. I didn't think that it was. I didn't think it was like a new planet found or anything, but it looked like anything. The two of the pictures that fascinated me was the two that were showing interaction with one of the plasma waves, because that gives me a distance. That tells me it's relatively close to the sun. The other ones I couldn't really tell because, with cameras, there's no real background. I mean, it could be 5 feet, it could be 500,000 miles. It's just no way of really telling. So the ones that were interacting with the plasma waves are interesting. One of the other ones I seen, which had a reflection off of whatever it was, I found that to be interesting. And I found it to be interesting for more than one reason. One, there was a reflection suggesting that the surface was metallic or smooth so that the sun would reflect off of it. But secondly, and more importantly, you could actually define structure in this. You could notice that it had like a dual beveled bottom sides. There seemed to be some type of large platform attached to it on top. And then there seemed to be something else on top of this. And when I said this on Kevin Smith, it reminded me of the submarine off of Red October in its basic shape and form. Kevin Smith kept telling me it reminded him of like a beer can or a Coke can on its side, which is true too. But to me, there was a little bit more detail there. But I still found it fascinating, but still didn't know what to do with it. I mean, it's one of those things. What can we actually do with this? What is it? Is it going to serve a purpose? And is it going to convince anyone outside of the community that these are real? So I'm waiting to see how that's all going to play out. I'm waiting for the article. Just let me know when the article comes out tonight, and I'll post it up on my
okay, good,
on my Facebook page, which
good.
Between the four of them now go out to like 10,000 people, so it'll get out that way, and people will know who it is and
oh, great.
what's going on. Yeah, for that, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, while I'm on that subject, I finally opened up a fan page for the UFO Undercover. So y'all can go. It actually says Joe Montaldo / UFO Undercover. So y'all be sure to go join it. It's a brand new page. I think I made it yesterday. You can find it on MySpace, and then there's a radio page for the radio network there too, which y'all should go by and see. And then there's actually two pages with my name on them. One that's getting almost full, and another one that someone actually made that Facebook gave back to me because they didn't have no business making it in the first place. But yeah, what can you do? Now, you know where there's? I know there was a video on this of YouTube, but I didn't like that one because that was somebody's computer. You know, the guy was recording his own computer. It's not to say that the guy's full of it or not, because I honestly don't know, but I would still rather see the original pics from NASA. So a friend of mine over at I can't remember the name of it now. They're the people that you can suggest photos taken of Mars. It's a new group out there, and you can send in your request, and they'll take high resolution pictures of Mars. I actually wrote to him and asked him if there was any possible way that I could see these originals, and I sent along the email with the video so to see if he could find them. He told me if he can find these, he will actually get me a copy of the originals and send them to me.
Oh, good.
So keep your fingers crossed on that, and I don't know if that's going to make any difference, ladies and gentlemen, and how all this comes out. But I got to tell you, on preliminary, and I'm saying preliminary, on a preliminary investigation, I would have to say this was something large sitting near our sun, and to see it that well on that particular type of camera, it has to be close to the size of Earth. So it's a significant thing. But by saying that, if it turns out that this camera is further out, or it's in a different orbit than what we were originally led to believe, then the objects could be quite a bit smaller and quite a bit closer to the camera. So we'll have to wait and see on all of that. But I just, the first time I seen them, I was kind of like, what the blank is that? Because it's a fascinating picture. And, you know, the first 4 or 5 I seen, I didn't see the plasma in the picture. I mean, I could see the sun behind the craft, because it's obviously a craft of some kind. It's not anything naturally occurring. Once you look at it, you can obviously tell it's something physical and tangible. The only explanation I heard, the only plausible explanation I've heard for this so far, which doesn't account for like the one seen in the rings and Saturn and some of the earlier pictures, was somebody told me just recently India sent off a massive amount of satellites towards the sun, and they were thinking that maybe the NASA camera had picked it up. Now, I went and looked on the Indian site. I got to say the satellites don't look like what I saw, so we're going to have to rule that out for now. But that's my job. They find them, and we try to figure out what they are. So, now, Alfred, I mean, so you think they're using the sun? Because, you know, I was thinking about this. What would they be doing by the sun? Now, the Stargate thing sounds pretty good. And then someone wrote to me last night about that series, Stargate Universe. For some reason, that ship actually uses the sun to refuel as it goes from solar system to solar system. It actually pulls in the corona of the sun to refuel. So that's 2 explanations I heard for what these things might actually be doing near our sun. I like the Stargate thing better, but, you know, I don't know. Until I get invited on board one, I'm going to kind of be like, oh, okay, what am I looking at here?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm begging for an invitation out there. I'm telling you.
Well, you know, I think that we're being I was about to say we're being matriculated into the University of the Galaxy, but then I thought, hey, maybe we're being matriculated into the kindergarten of the galaxy.
Probably true.
You know, and so I just want to really be very humble about this. But when we take a leading edge physicist like Paramane, who actually walks you through and takes one of the images that stereo produces, and he can show on a regular pattern that this is the most plausible explanation of these events. and these objects, and it begins to make sense from a ufological point of view, an extraterrestrial and interdimensional point of view, and an exopolitical point of view. Then certain things begin to click in, but then you begin to say, am I in kindergarten or am I a freshman in college,
Well, when it comes to ET, I think we're in the kindergarten thing. I really do. And that brings up something else I want to say before I forget about it. I'm writing a new article dealing with something I read that came out of the recent crash retrieval conference. Nothing to do with the crash retrieval conference itself or Ryan Woods. I don't want anybody to take it out of context. But one of the speakers there wrote an article about James Carrion. And, guys, I'm not James's supporters by any means, but I thought the article was rather, how can I say this on FM radio, full of poop. I just found it to be one-sided and lacking, and so I cannot believe that I'm going to write an article to take up for James Carrion. I'm in shock about this, but I had to bring it up. Anyway, we're moving on now. Because I wasn't a big supporter of James Carrion and MUFON, but when I heard about his stance on Roswell and his stance on cattle mutilations and Betty and Barney Hill, I had to kind of change my mind because he was following more along the lines of what I personally subscribe to and follow. So it was a pleasant surprise. And then I found out he stepped down. So I was kind of like, well, what the hell? The man finally stands up for himself and then he steps down. I'm like, what kind of BS is this? But hey, it's a game. I done learned half of ufology is playing the game. So I got to say I was disappointed by that. Other than that. But anyway, we don't want to talk about that. That's for another show. I got a show coming up on that in the near future about games and ufology. But getting back to what we were talking about, really, what do you feel personally? Because you've been in the field a long time and you've heard contactees and other people talk about their experiences. Kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, maybe elementary school, maybe middle school, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah, we seem to be in 2010,
like that.
which is moving along very, very quickly, where all of a sudden we have this event where there's very suggestive data from the stereo spacecraft. Number one, and number two, I was reading which we'll be publishing the explanation by one of the NASA scientists there. I don't know whether you had a chance to look at that, but this is a fellow. I'm just going to go over to my monitor here. And this is a fellow, Dr. Joseph B. Gurman, who is a NASA Stereo project scientist, who responded in writing with to the images of the giant UFOs near the sun with the following technical explanation, quote, and it's a very lengthy. It says, quote, what you're seeing is the difference between the, quote, beacon mode, near real-time, heavily compressed, binned, I believe, 512 by 512 or smaller images, and normal playback telemetry images, 2048 by 2048 naive mode, less heavily but still lossily compressed. Normally we get most of each day covered by the near real-time beacon mode data through the help of a variety of ground stations around the world, including some operated by radio amateurs. So we have prompt information when space weather events have originated at the sun. The full resolution playback telemetry comes from dedicated periods of downlink station contacts through NASA's Deep Space Network, DSN. A single playback can last hours and covers data from a day or more stored on one of the spacecraft's solid-state recorders. Those data are then played back over the internet to the Mission Operations Center and the Stereo Science Center, and thence to the instrument team's home institutions, where they are processed over the course of a day or so. Thus, in normal operations, the full resolution images will be 3 days behind real time. Newer images will be the lower resolution, more compressed beacon mode images, and older images will have been replaced by the full resolution playback data. On January 18th, and January 18th, 2010 is when the images started to appear. That is when the images of the giant UFOs. At 21:47 Universal Time, the quote, central data recorder, end of quote, at DSN that stores all the playback data from all missions DSN supports failed. Isn't that something? Hello?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just thinking about when you said failed. I was thinking, is that something?
Yeah, failed. I mean, and then he says a backup CDR recorder took over, but apparently started working on data from January 10th instead of just the 4 previous hours as designed. The last I heard, the DSN engineers don't understand why, but it certainly sounds like a software issue. For some reason, DSN is unable to reset a pointer and say, please start processing from this time instead of that time. So we and all other missions supported by DSN are waiting for our playback data from January 18th and all following days. As soon as we get it and the instrument teams have reformatted the telemetry into scientifically useful formats that allow, for instance, making data into images, we'll post the images and other steer browse data into the normal places. And I don't know why DSN designed such an inflexible CDR system. I suspect they may modify it after this experience. Best, Joe Gurman, NASA Stereo Project scientist. Now, so he's saying that snafu, situation normal, all fouled up, right? And that's what accounts for these images. So what is curious is that NASA took a number of the images offline.
Did anybody get any copies before other than the like?
Yeah, there are prior copies, and there are images that have been saved by researchers within the exopolitical community that have been saved. But what he's saying now is that they don't have any fresh images from January 18th when the UFOs began to appear. Suddenly this failed, and their system now went back to January 10th. So they're going to have to process it through, and when it's all ready, we'll release the images. So are we going to get airbrushing or not is the big question.
Well, it's a good chance you're going to get airbrushing. I mean, unless something slips through. But what'll happen more than likely, what has happened in the past, like with Mars and stuff, the originals probably will be airbrushed, and then after a while, after a little time passes, NASA will go back to its, or I should say, Milan will go back to its regularly. Let's just put out the pictures without looking at them, because, frankly, like I was told by 2 people that work for, or actually for JPL, so there's just entirely too many pictures that are coming in to go through them all.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the pictures are released. Now they'll make a special effort to go through these, but initially when the stuff was being found in the Subtonian region, Mars, and other places, man, all of a sudden it was like, Arthur C. Clarke's people were finding this, that, and the other thing on Mars, and then it just stopped for a while, for about a year or two, and then it picked back up again because NASA went back, or I should say JPL went back to its old ways of just posting stuff as it came in, and people started finding stuff again. So I think that's the same thing you're going to see here. And as they change people and new people take over in different places inside the organization, things get forgotten, and you might get a new guy in charge of the camera, or a new guy in charge of this research, and he'll say, no, stop wasting your time, and that just post whatever comes in. So I think initially you will see some airbrushing, and then we'll just have to keep checking, because unless there's been some recent things in NASA lately that makes me think that there may be a swing in opinion on NASA. Matter of fact, there was the NASA science director actually wrote an article about the show you and I did a while back,
Really?
And he had said about the billion thing, and he said, I don't think, and this is his words, he said, I don't think the planet is actually being visited. He said, but if the planet was visited, I would have to agree with Joe Montaldo that it would be between 10 and 15% of the population that would be being selected in order to get an accurate view of the overall diversity of our population.
Really?
So that kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah. Now,
it was nice to see. And then the Australian magazine let me do a rebuttal to an article they did on it, which was pretty much the same thing, and I included that in it.
Good.
So it's that, and recently I've been getting stuff sent to me from friends over at NASA, about we heard this or we seen that or this is coming up. It's like the ones that told me about getting the images redone on some of the other stuff. You can request new images and shots anywhere that we have surveyor-type satellites. You can actually send in to NASA now and request. Now, there's another program that a gentleman or someone, now I forgot who had sent it to me, my brain's going dead, but it sent me another program where you request the photos on Mars, which is a really cool thing. So there seems to be somewhat of a change. It's not like I think they're going to disclose anything, but I think they're taking a little looser handedness in the way they deal with this particular subject matter, because I'm thinking, as far as they're concerned, is they know there's life. Whether they're going to admit to its visiting a planet or not, that's beside the point. NASA knows there's life out there other than us. So why put yourself in a position when it's made public that you look like a fool? This way, they can kind of take a middle-of-the-road approach and not confirm or deny, but still let information flow through the organization without having to deny everything that goes on. So I think you're going to see a slow but fundamental change in the way NASA does it. So we might not see the airbrushing. We might actually see the photos get out. But I would have to say initially, first 6 months, a year, they'll probably airbrush them, and then we'll probably start seeing them again later on.
Yeah. But now, the critical difference is that we are having the emergence in the public sector, not, I'm not talking about in the black budget sector scientists, but in the public sector of physicists and scientists like Nassim Haramein, who are acknowledged scientists who have applied their skills to trying to solve these problems and who are now publicly making the results of their research available, so that these photographs are moving from the area of anomalies of giant UFOs around the sun to there being alternative possible explanations. I mean, you can always say, oh, that's a technical glitch. But then once you pass that and you begin to grapple with the issue, we do now have a systematic explanation that frames the solution in terms of quantum physics and what we know about how the space-time, the time-space hologram is constructed, and how advanced civilizations might choose to change their location within that hologram, i.e. by accessing different exit points, or what we call stargates.
Well, the Stargate thing fascinates me for a couple of reasons, or portals, whatever everybody wants to call them. I don't want to get into an argument about that with the people, but there's a photo on the ICAR site that was taken by my Texas State Director while we were in Blunt, Iowa, Florida. You can still find it on the Coast to Coast site. The very first time I ever went on Coast to Coast a couple of years ago, they actually posted this photo and they kept it. We didn't see this thing, by the way. One of our things are when we're traveling, if it's power plants, deep water channels, military facilities, or national parks, we'll usually take pictures of the skies around them because things show up in the camera. In this particular case, Alfred, there is a disk, probably about half the size of this power plant. And the reason you could see it is there was a little trail of smoke coming out of the stack. And whatever this thing was swirling picked up the smoke. And you can actually see how the smoke has swirled around it. And it's like a big disc, and in the center there's a hole. Well, we weren't sure if it was a craft, like a cloak craft or something, that the smoke was going around, or if it was a gate. What tipped us off that it might be a gate was the fact that right next to the tower is what looks to be a UFO approaching the gate on an upwards movement. What kills me about it is probably one of the best pictures anywhere in the field dealing with this, but yet you don't see it anywhere. Like MUFON doesn't want to talk about it. None of the major things want to touch it. It's an outstanding photo, and there was 5 people in the car when the photo was taken. So and plus everything was tagged, and it's much better than like that Dropastone picture they made a big deal out of. So I got to kind of wonder at this point. Is there something in the community, and I'm not talking about in the country itself or in the world for that matter, but in the UFO community, there seems to be a structure now that is keeping legitimate information out of the field. Matter of fact, in the last 2 years, I've seen a much increase of inside fighting amongst ufologists and information being suppressed by the field itself. So I'm starting to get bugged by this.
Well, no, I think that if we go back to the origins of the field, even the term unidentified flying object was developed by the U.S. Air Force.
That's true.
And you could say that the term itself was a term of, I don't want to use the word, but I'll use it, disinformation. That is, there's disinformation contained within it, because one could have easily said, rather than unidentified flying object, one could have said possible approaching intelligently guided spacecraft.
There could have been a lot of things other than
some, and so that UFO became synonymous with swamp gas, with air balloons, with weather balloons, and with all of the other patterns of ridicule that the 1953 CIA Robertson panel mandated, where they said that any public discourse around the extraterrestrial presence or UFO presence in government, in media, in education, in science had to be ridiculed. So that from the inception of, quote, ufology, that was a field where, since the term itself had been invented by the Air Force, where you would expect a great deal of what they call penetration, and that is by assets, by intelligence assets who are in there to provide information which would be useful, but at some point tainted, so that there would not be progress in the field. These are tactics which, if we look at in a different movement that I'm also familiar with, which is the peace and disarmament movement, it was known now that some of the founders of the peace and disarmament movement in the United States were, in fact, assets of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Well, I don't doubt that. I mean, that's not even a hard thing to doubt, that the CIA or the NSA or the OSA or any OSI or any of these groups have been. That's another thing too. You know, I've been getting writers writing into me lately, more so to ICAR than to the Paranormal Radio Network, asking me how did they know what organizations can be trusted, who's been infiltrated, who may or may not be disinformation people in the field.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, well, guys, I said, as far as disinformation goes, I'm not even going to touch that one. Not even with a 10-foot pole. Well, because, you know, I was talking with a young man the other day who had found out about Richard Doty and had been listening to stuff that Linda Moulton Howe said, and then later on he found out that it was disinformation. Of course, he was disheartened by it, and I said, well, that happens in the field. I mean, there are a lot of gullible researchers in the field, and sometimes things that appear to be too good to be true are exactly that. They're too good to be true. I said, but even in Doty's case, there was some legitimate information told out.
Right.
And I found out with a lot of the disinformation, there is some legitimate information. Well, it's always easier to swallow a pill with a little coating of the truth on it. So it's tough right now in the field, and not being able to. It's like when we're talking about this thing around the sun, and till just recently, until like a week ago, I hadn't even heard about it, which surprised me because I usually am pretty well informed in everything that goes on in the field. And when Kevin was telling me, oh, they've been out for a year and this, that, and other thing, I was kind of like, you got to be blanking kidding me. And then when I was talking, I'm not going to mention names, but I was talking with 4 or 5 really big ufologists yesterday. They didn't know nothing about it. And I'm kind of like, well, what's going on here? So that brings me back to that seems to be, at least in some cases, that someone inside and I mean inside the field, is deliberately and intentionally keeping information down.
Yeah, I mean, this is just now, put it this way, this wave of UFO sightings around the sun began around January 18th, 2010. Today, January 28th, so it began 10 days ago. However, there have been prior waves. But this wave, I think, is one wave that is going to garner much more attention because of a number of factors. Number one, it is catching the attention of the UFO and the exopolitics community. Number two, NASA has put out a denial which may or may not be plausible, but at least which can be examined.
Yeah.
And number three, we have scientists coming forth which provide quantum physics explanations which are consistent with the extraterrestrial presence. So it's a very rich field. It's not. I mean, there is no swamp gas on the sun, and there are no weather balloons on the sun. As you said, there might be explanations of the Indian, space system, but I think that could be, easily explained. But I think that we're only 10 days into the current flap, if we want to bring those terms over, or the current wave. And I think that it's so. If this wave is true, and if in fact, I mean, I know that there are a lot of ifs here, but if in fact these are Earth-sized spacecraft that are using the sun as a gate, then we're talking about the extraterrestrials making major disclosure that Uncle Sam has nothing to do with and can't say anything about, because you're talking about the sun and you're talking about Earth, spacecraft that are the size of the Earth.
And see, it's significant. Well, it's interesting because I had talked with this was a long time ago. I'd actually talked with some friends of mine about, being that we're so far out on the spiral arm that our solar system, we'd make a great stepping stone to go to Proxima Centauri. I mean, not for any of our technologies, but if you were a race that had intergalactic technology, this is the place. This would be the stopping place. We've got a nice, healthy sun you can refuel from or use it for transport. We have a planet full of resources and water, so you can refuel and get your food and your water before you make a long-distance jump like that. It made a little sense to me because I could never figure out what it would be that they would be interested in us. Of course, now that the red dwarf galaxy thing has finally been released to the general, I mean, we've been knowing about it for about a decade and a half, but now that it's been released to the general public, that also adds to the fact that somebody may have been jumping from galaxy to galaxy to see what was going on and using this area as a stepping stone, because the red dwarf galaxy is actually in our section of the galaxy, which, matter of fact, most current science today believes that that's where we're from. They don't think our solar system's native to the Milky Way anymore. They think it's native from this red dwarf galaxy, from Sagittarius is what it's called. And that's where they think that Earth actually came from. The whole solar system came from there. They no longer think that our solar system is native to the Milky Way, which puts a lot of twist on a lot of things, because if we were deposited here some 2 billion years ago, maybe that's why the aliens have such an interest in us. Or maybe we all came from the red dwarf galaxy, and that's what brought life to the Milky Way. No way of really knowing. But I got to say, I've been pleasantly impressed by the amount of scientists that have actually came out now and said, no, guys, it looks like that we're not native to the Milky Way. We're native to this other galaxy. We were deposited here. And recently, it was 177 scientists came out and said that the red dwarf galaxy is what is increasing the heat on the planet. And the way they found this out, and this has to just tick off people like Al Gore beyond belief, every planet in our solar system is warming up, every one of them.
Right.
So there's no way man can cause the entire solar system to warm up. So it's not that man doesn't contribute to warming, we do, but we are nowhere near the primary cause, and all the science now is starting to suggest that it's part of this. And now what they're worried about is, will this actually decrease? Or will, as we get closer to this source, will it just get hotter to the point where there's another great extinction on the planet? Because I forgot his name. He's an astrophysicist, Marty Brown, I think is what it is. He said that Earth, the solar system itself, passes near this particular area every, I forgot how many million years. It just happens to coincide with the last 3 great extinctions on the planet.
Right, right, and we're coming to a convergence point.
Yeah.
Of those great cycles. It's not only the multi-million year cycle where old species disappear and new species spontaneously appear, but it is also a cycle where the Earth passes through the galactic plane of the Milky Way, and it's also the 26,000 year, and that itself is a 11,500 year cycle.
Yeah.
So there are multiple cycles which are occurring coming up on that, so perhaps those are the giant ships, Joe, that are here to evacuate us when we shift dimensions in a couple of years. I'm just speaking hypothetically here. I'm not offering that as a serious alternative, but I know that a number of people within the contactee movement have approached me saying that the alternative that is really occurring is that Earth is about to shift phase, and that the shock is going to be so great that humans won't be able to take it, and they'll be taken off planet. I don't subscribe to that, but with this appearance of giant UFOs in the sun, and with an explanation that it could be that these are stargates, you can certainly see how, with Earth-sized UFOs, if someone wanted to evacuate the planet in short order, they could.
Oh yeah. Well, and that is part of what the contactees say. Now, a gentleman wrote me after Kevin Smith the other day, and he had a suggestion that, because 2011 is when we get into this outrageous solar cycle that we've never seen the likes of before, where even NASA and the U.S. Space Station said it is possible that flares could get large enough to lap the planet. Of course, if that happens, it's going to kill hundreds of millions of people, but maybe that's what they're here for, to stop it, or maybe they're here to get those sections of the planet away when it happens. But see, nobody really knows because NASA said, it could do that, and then again, it might not do anything. Then again, it might just knock out your electronics. They have no clue, but they did say, because of ice cores, there have been times in Earth's history when the radiation and the actual plasma lapped our planet. It actually touched our planet. Things like that, we can't survive stuff like that. It's not something a human can survive. Even if you go underground, the enormous amount of radiation is going to kill everything on that section of the planet quickly. So I don't know. It kind of scares me a little bit, but then again, it could be nothing. I mean, I've lived through now, I told this to Kevin the other night, I'd say I'm 47. I've lived through like 25 doomsdays now. And lately we've made it through 911 and, not 911, the end of the millennium and to the start of 2000. It was 1999, 2000, and 2001, all three of those years were supposed to be the end of us. I mean, right. We got through that, and we got through Y2K, and we got through 84 and 76, were also places that were supposed to destroy the planet. So I'm hoping that in this 2011 and 2012 thing, this is what this pans out to be. But now that I'm actually hearing NASA talk about these solar flares, I'm kind of like, are they telling us the truth or not?
Yeah. I mean, NASA issued a report at the beginning of 2009, at which it said that in the worst case scenario, in solar cycle 24, which we're in now, the max would come. They put out actually various dates. One date said May 2013, and then they had another date in 2012. So they're kind of going back and forth. But they said that the maximum death scenario would not come actually from solar flares. What would happen is that the Earth currently, the industrialized countries, including China, have a high-powered electrical grid system, which is extremely vulnerable to solar flares. So that if we have a repeat of the Carrington event, which occurred in 1859, which destroyed the World Telegraph System, which was the grid back in those days, that if we had a repeat of that would result in, quote, millions dead in the United States alone, about $4 trillion worth of damage in the United States alone. And they doubted, quote, it could be that the United States would never recover. And that is because it would destroy a lot of the basic electrical power generation throughout the U.S. And people, once that happens, you would not have life support systems for like months, and people would just, starve. And so it's not the sun that's killing it, but rather it's the infrastructure. So I did a whole series of articles. In fact, if you go to examiner.com, you'll find, just Google in my name there, and this is one of the more popular articles that we did on the 2012 solar flares, which NASA predicts a system's collapse. And I then went to the Obama White House website, and I said, well, what are its plans for 2012? And I looked them up on the Obama White House website, and they said, well, we're hoping by 2012 to have 10% of our energy in renewables like windmills. And so here you have NASA saying in 2012 we could have solar flares that are going to knock out the world grid so that tens of millions of people die, $4 trillion of damage in the U.S. alone, yes, will never recover, and the White House saying Well, we're hoping to have 10% of energy in windmills. In other words, it's a supreme case of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. So I asked in that article whether or not the human race is not being set up to fail. Because when that NASA report came out, that was the same time that the G20 met in England with the Queen of England. And all the G20 nations they're all of the nations that have the high-powered grid system that are vulnerable to these solar flares. And they were in there talking about, whatever, but they weren't talking about solar flares.
Yeah, and see, there's no telling what they were talking about either. That's the thing. And
yeah. I mean, we've got. I mean, just to look at the darker side of things, it's documented by many of our colleagues in the field. The network of deep underground military bases, which, according to one of my informants, are actually built for survival during coming natural catastrophe. Number one. Number two, the national capital in terms of state has moved from West Virginia to Denver, Colorado. So now it's under the Denver airport. Number three, you have entire countries like Norway where they have built a whole elaborate system of underground bunkers with food and everything, and they're giving out passes on a survival basis to skills that will be needed to survive in the future. Now, all of these are Illuminati-driven plans, and so it may be that of course, the enlightened civilizations that may be coming through the sun as our Stargate, and that we're evidencing now, have a different plan, because they're not going to allow this Earth really to be destroyed. I don't believe.
See, I've always wondered if not so much if they would let the Earth be destroyed, because Earth looks like it's recyclable.
Yeah.
I'm more interested if they're going to let us be destroyed, because really, we've seen, 3 great extinctions and 2 great bottlenecks on the planet. So I don't know if they would actually intervene on that behalf, and it might be nicer for them if we weren't here. It'd be less of a headache. But then that all comes down to, and I've talked about with other people about this, is what do you feel like they are, not in a spiritual way, but in a moral way? Do they share the same moral values that we do? Would they, like we're over in Haiti right now, spending our own money, putting our troops on there, letting other people we know put their lives at risk? Or would they do that for us is what it comes down to. And if I got to judge them by their actions, I'm thinking not so much. I'm thinking
well,
might let us
I'm going to throw a really hot potato out there, Joe, and that is we just participated with an independent scientist in a 2-hour radio program, and we have a link to it up on our exopolitics.com breaking news 2010 breaking news sidebar, and it was just we just got a video in with a very extensive science-based technical article, which we just posted up there too in that link. We don't post that directly on exopolitics.com because a lot of exopolitics folks get really upset when we post, quote, conspiracy material in exopolitics, but we post it in other blogs and then we link to it. But this one, if you go to exopolitics.com, because of the social importance, we put it there. And a number of years ago, we've been tracking the use of what are called environmental weapons, either for weather warfare or what they call seismic warfare. And that is where you use environmental weapons to create earthquakes. And our scientific team, in fact, tracked the May 2nd, 2008 cyclone in Burma, in Myanmar, which had all of the signatures of a weather warfare event. They even went to Myanmar in October of 2009 to further that exploration, and their findings are available online at peaceinspace.org, which it does appear to be a seismic, a weather warfare event. Now, and then further, on May 12th, 2008, there was an earthquake in China which killed 80,000 people. This was just prior to the Summer '08 Olympics. And there seem to be earthquakes that are created or weather warfare events that are created just prior to the Olympics, just kind of destabilize things. And that too had a seismic warfare and environmental warfare signature around it. And you can go to your listeners can go to peaceinspace.org for the science-based articles and extensive radio programs with independent scientists that go into depth that in fact was a seismic warfare event and the reasons why. So we being up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the 2010 Olympics about to start here in a couple of weeks. The 2010 Olympics are going to start here on February 12th, 2010, which is just a couple of weeks away. So about 2 weeks ago, a number of us in the circle started saying, well, are we going to have any false flag events, and are there going to be any earthquakes around this 2010 Olympics? And this was about literally 3 or 4 days, and bango, we had the Haitian earthquake. Of course, the head of state of Canada, Michaëlle Jean, is a Haitian-born, and she's a dual citizen of Haiti. And she broke down emotionally, and she's the head of state of Canada.
Dang.
So we immediately started to investigate from that standpoint, and there the best scientific evidence. If you go to exopolitics.com, you'll find a link there in the breaking news, and you can go there and you can listen and you can watch and you can read and you can judge for yourself. So I just wanted to throw that hot potato out there, which is that Haiti may have been, in fact, a seismic event.
Well, we're going to take a break here in a second, but whatever his name is, Chavez, been down there screaming for a week now that this was some weapon the U.S. used so that it could take over Haiti. Guys, I have no idea, but on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. My name is Joe Montaldo, host of UFO Undercover. I'm sitting and speaking with Alfred Webre this evening. We'll be back in about 8 minutes to pick up this conversation, so I want everyone to please stay tuned. See y'all then.
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to UFO Undercover. I hope everyone's enjoying the show so far. I know Alfred's going to get us some links. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Joe Montaldo. I'm sitting and speaking with Alfred Webre before I go off on a tangent. When Alfred sends me these links, when I post the archive this evening, I will attach the link to the archive so that y'all can link directly in about the ships and the coronas and all we were talking about earlier. Because I would like to get as many opinions on this as possible. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. These things fascinate me. I'm not willing to jump to any conclusions on what they may or may not be, other than the fact that they appear to be, well, I don't want to say man-made, because frankly, man couldn't build anything like that. But they do seem to be, made. They don't seem to be naturally occurring objects. They don't seem to be rogue planets or rogue suns or anything along that. At least two of the ones I've seen definitely look metallic in origin and definitely look like some type of craft. Doesn't mean it's what it is, and we still got other things to find out. But when you get a chance, take a look. I know there's some video on it on YouTube about it. Somewhere in the Pal Talk virtual audience, there's probably a link floating around left over from the Kevin Smith show the other night when we were on the show. So y'all can check it out that way as well. I would encourage everyone to go take a look at this and write to Alfred or myself. Alfred takes emails all the time, so feel free to write to him. And you can always find him over at exopolitics. What is it, exopolitics.com, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you can always find him over there as well. And because y'all know we carry his shows over here, so just write and see, express it. Now, if you have any inside information and you'd like to share it, feel free to contact us and let us know. But I'm not like everybody else when it comes to inside information. I'm going to want some way to back it up or some way to authenticate it before I even discuss it in a public forum in any shape, form, or fashion. But quick question about that, Alfred, before we move on to something else. I was looking at these. I've seen, 5 images now, 6 images? Let's see. There seemed to be one parked at the bottom. I hate to say bottom because there's no bottom or top in space, but for the sake of argument, one seemed to be parked at the bottom. One seemed to be parked off to the side. And then there seemed to be 2 others kind of catty-cornered to the top of the sun, and then one off to the left. So it's almost like they had set up some pattern around the sun. And I don't know if there's anything to it or not, or maybe they're there to guide ships in and out as they're going. I'm not sure, but I did find it fascinating that there was, first off, more than one. And secondly, they seem to be in some type of grid layout. Have you thought about that or looked at that?
Yes. In fact, I think that your listeners will find this article very instructive, and especially the 10-minute lecture that physicist Nassim Haramein gives, because you'll be able to see not only those objects when they're stationary, but when they're moving and when they seem to be moving in and out of the singularity that is of the sun as a stargate. And he mentions specific latitudes, for example, 19.47 latitudes, where the giant UFOs are entering and leaving the solar system. So they use specific areas, and the areas, their entry and their leaving via the Stargate in some cases is accompanied by solar flares. So you get much more into the dynamics of how the sun functions as a singularity Stargate black hole when you see it, when you see an actual video of the solar probe, of the NASA stereo solar probe, accompanied by a quantum physics explanation of what is occurring as these UFOs enter and leave from the sun.
Has anybody contacted Dr. Paul, which is Labette? I never can say his last name.
Dr. Paul Laviolette.
Has anybody talked to him about this? Because I'd like to hear his opinion on this.
Yeah. He of course has focused on the galactic black hole, on the galactic singularity, and has written a great deal about what he calls galactic wave theory.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, and there is also some concept which comes in part of the physicist Nassim Haramein's lecture, which is as follows. He maintains that the Earth also has singularities and can serve as stargates for dimensional spaceships entering and leaving. And that, however, a spaceship of the size of an Earth would not use the Earth as the dimensional porthole, but that they use the volcanoes as that dimensional porthole. And I know that around the Earth's volcanoes, there's a tremendous amount of UFO activity, which may relate to this singularity theory of this portal or Stargate theory. That is a way of accessing into the solar system with a smaller spacecraft for dimension, may be through volcanoes.
Well, we got enough of them on our planet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other planets out there that have them. Of course, the ones on Mars seem to be dead, but still, they're there.
Yeah, and so it's we're so used to thinking in 3 or 4 dimensional terms that once we start thinking in quantum terms, then a lot of the data that we see, we can begin to reframe. And I think that that's what's happening in 2010, that we can actually begin to have a public discourse in this fashion, i.e., we can say, well, look, this is what NASA's doing. This is their technical explanation. Doesn't make sense. This is the data. These are prior giant UFO waves that we had that Stereo found. This is the current wave that started on the 18th of January 2010. We're about 10 days into the wave now. This is the quantum physics explanation of what's occurring, which is based on prior waves. So, there's a lot of depth now that we can relate to, and a lot of tools that we can bring to the explanation. And so I think that we're beginning to mature, and also the public, the audience, the human population is itself maturing. And people have said that the release of television series like Stargate is itself kind of an acclimatization program.
It's a tough one. It's a tough call. See, I'm waiting to see where this is going to go. Now that we've seen them, that we know there's something there, and I'm sure by now they have to know that we know that they're there. I'm waiting to see what they may or may not do, if they're going to reappear. And that's a tough thing, since NASA or JPL or Milan controls these photos. It's going to be a tough thing to know if they did leave, or if they did stay, or if they even care that we even know that they're there. And so we already know something that they can't get close to Earth because it would cause too much damage to our planet. Actually, I hate to say it, being where they are by the sun is probably the closest they can get to us without causing gravitational eddies or changing in tides and things along those lines, because their sheer mass would cause problems with our own mass. So unless they have a way to cancel it out.
Yeah. Just thinking, though, if we go to classic ufology, there are tools in classic ufology that we can transfer over to begin to understand this phenomena. These UFOs may appear regularly in waves, just like we have seen that other types of UFOs tend to appear in waves. And so if we had the staff, we could go back over the past stereo videos and photographs and begin to plot out if there were waves, and look at the sun as a major source of UFOs.
All this is going to give me a headache. I can see it coming. Well, I mean, because it's a significant thing, but then I've seen other significant things in my time in the field, and I get to the point, because it's not the field so much. The field will pay attention eventually. They'll wake up and see this for what it is, and start talking about it and getting more involved with it, and things along those lines. Because sure enough, they'll jump on anything else. I'm not sure what the holdup is here, but I'm thinking mainstream media. If we have these photos and we can prove these photos came from NASA's camera, I can't see why mainstream media wouldn't be more interested in this. They don't have to say it's alien craft. They can say, what is this around the sun? Is this some new planet that we haven't seen before, or things along those lines? Now, I recently asked some friends of mine, some amateur astronomers, the ones that happen to take glances at the sun. I asked them to start checking to see if they see, like, one of the ways we find extrasolar planets is to see spots moving back and forth and across the sun. So I've asked them to keep an eye out to see if they see anything moving across our sun like that, going or coming, or something that they might run across. So I know there's a couple of them looking. I don't know if anything's going to come out of it or not, but I know there are a couple of them looking. And I talked with Mr. Burke the other day. He said he's going to get the coordinates and set up his telescope to look directly at the coordinates to see if there's anything there now, and start monitoring on a regular basis. So who knows? Maybe NASA might not tell us, but somebody else might be able to find them or see them. So, and he's got a pretty decent telescope system. He's a college professor. He's got a pretty good system, and I know he can take photographs. So keep your fingers crossed. We might get something that way. I've always wondered too. Maybe you can help me with this, Alfred. People always ask me how come astronomers don't see more UFOs. I've actually known several astronomers that have, but you never hear much from the astronomy community itself. They don't really talk about it, and if they do talk about it, they're not going to talk about it on the record. And at first I thought it was okay, it's to protect their career and blah, 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 blah. But now as time is going on, I'm wondering if there's not a power that be that's actually come around and told these guys or their bosses not to discuss this. And military and Air Force in the old days, you could discuss it amongst yourself, but you weren't allowed to discuss it outside of your company, which I think is still true even today. So I'm wondering if maybe there's something like that running around out there that keeps these guys from saying anything, because there's a lot of people that look at the sun. There's a lot of different astronomers that's looking at the sun, and I'm wondering why we hadn't seen anything prior to this by one of them. And something else that's bothered me too recently. Russian and China. There's been several other satellites that have gone to Mars and other places, and it only seems these anomalies only show up in American pictures. Any thoughts on why that may be? Because now I'm kind of worried there might be a hoax. I mean, not this particular event, but maybe some of the other stuff in the past. I was always wondering about that because, I've poked around in Russian and Chinese and Japanese and even British and European satellite stuff, and there just doesn't seem to be anything like these things we see that show up, the different anomalies that show up.
Yeah.
And it can't be because our equipment's any better, because frankly, Europeans have just as much good technology as we do.
Well, but also just to provide a couple of examples, if we take Soviet examples, number one, there's a 1989 photograph which of the Soviet probe to Phobos, one of the Martian moons.
Yeah, I like that photo, by the way.
Yeah, and this was released by one of the cosmonauts in the early 90s, a woman. And she said, it shows a UFO, a spacecraft coming out and shooting down that craft. A second item, which Bob Dean, our colleague, showed at the Barcelona conference in July of '09, was a Soviet satellite photo. It was an infrared photo of the surface of Mars, and it showed the grid pattern of the heat from a grid pattern of an underground city on Mars that he said was about the size of Chicago. Now, I can't verify as to that size, but you can go up to our Examiner articles again, and you'll see some of the articles on Mars there, and just click on that. We've got that photograph there. So there are anomalies that come out. I would say that what it is that the American mainstream media, I'm not talking about the alternative media, I'm talking about the mainstream media, which is the media that has been under the mandate put out by the 1953 Robertson panel, which essentially said anything about ETs or UFOs has to be ridiculed or is off limits. Even to this day, I'm talking about a mainstream journalist, Washington Post, New York Times, Los Angeles Times. They would not run a good image from other space agencies. And also, so we wouldn't have access to them. And this would really, I think, depend on leaks from other space agencies to the ufological community. For example, we probably have good relationships in Brazil and Mexico, from the Mexican governments down to the Brazilian ufological or extraterrestrial research communities, and in Mexico. I'm not sure. I don't think that that's the case in Europe, or I'm not sure. Russia and China seems just to be getting on the bandwagon now. We have the case of the UFO, which is now being studied for a year in China by a scientific team, and their report will be out for about a year from now. So the gates that have kept up, or the gatekeeping rather, that has kept up, been put in place by the mainstream media and by what they call Operation Mockingbird. And this is thoroughly documented, where many covert assets or agents of American military intelligence are actually double agents where they have jobs as editors, say at Associated Press, but they're also assets of a particular intelligence agency so that they can monitor and control the flow of news. And this has been thoroughly documented under Operation Mockingbird, and people can Google it and can look that up. And, you know, people brag about it. Former directors of the CIA bragged about it. So the ET area and the UFO area being the highest level of security, most of the images from the military of extraterrestrial spacecraft that they have are certainly not going to get into the mainstream media, are not going to be leaked through that filter. You've got to wait. You know, we got one through the cosmonauts through Robert Dean's connections, or when the Soviet cosmonaut came to the U.S., for whatever reason, she was allowed to leak that photograph of the UFO on Phobos.
And that photograph, I mean, that whole image of when that ship, when I say that probe was rounding Phobos and that beam was coming back the other way, you know, every time I think about that particular photo or video, because I've seen a photo and video, I have to wonder, why hasn't, you know, I know the Russians had to be like, what the blank was this? As far as they know, the Americans don't have any things out there that could do this, and they don't have anything out there that can do this. And this was obviously not some random burst of energy because it was focused. Plus, not only was it focused, but you could see it making the curve of Phobos, which means there was some kind of intelligent control behind it. And then, of course, the probe went dead after that. There was a flash, and then the thing was dead. But you've got to wonder why no one in mainstream media said, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, it's these rules. I mean, and we're talking about a set of rules by the highest levels of the invisible government, and which was set in place by the Durant Report of the Robertson panel going back to 1953, and we're already into 57 years of the strictest censorship on this area, where if you have anybody in mainstream media reports on this with a straight face, they're canned. I mean, and they're lucky if all they lose is their job. You know, and that's been in place, and for a long time, and that's why many times many of the reports of our press conferences at the National Press Club have had a ridicule factor, particularly reports written by certain reporters of the Washington Post who you know, were former Yale Skull and Bones and who were just sent there to write spike pieces.
I get, see, and it's something I've talked with Stephen Bassett about, and even you and a few others. I mean, we need to somehow or another get a large enough group of us together that we can start applying some real pressure. I know that as a group and a field, we're like the mosquito buzzing around someone's head, but we're not big enough to really irritate anybody enough to make any real mistakes or to get any real truth out. And then, you know, I've got to say, too, over the years, I've seen an enormous amount of different information being put into this field by sources that people say, you know, are deep throats or insiders or this, that, or the other thing. As a matter of fact, we were talking about Dr. Greer a couple of weeks ago, and everybody was, you know, how he started out and how he was going to do so much for ufology and how he turned out to be something entirely different. But nothing ever came of those witnesses, those more than 400 witnesses he had. And the 20 that he did use for the videos and all have now come under a lot of fire and a lot of scrutiny, not being what they said they were, not being who they said they were, not having the connections that they said they were, and so on and so forth. And it just seems to be that, if we're gonna crack down and start to fight back and push back and really try to get something going, then we're going to have a new set of standards for evidence. We're not going to be able to just take Joe Blow's word that he said this or she said that. If you can't verify it, it's useless. It really is, because at this point, there's as much, if not more, disinformation in the field than there is real information. And I think we're going to see this with these particular things that we're talking about around the sun. I think you're going to see a couple people like you and I and Kevin and a few other people picking it up and talking about it. But in general, I think you're going to see more pushing that, it's not real, it's something they're making up, or it's some kind of hoax, or some kind of picture, somebody cropped the photo, or so on and so forth. And it just irritates me, and it does have a lot to do with the powers to be. It's just, while I was listening to, while you were talking, I was thinking about it. We got these rules, and we got these people pushing, and we got all these, I hate to call them government, because they're not real government in the way we think of government, but they're associated to the government. And you got to wonder how many of these people are either part of this field or has control of someone in the field. And I don't mean that they're telling the person they have control, but in some shape, form, or fashion, they have control over what's being said or how it's being said or how it's being put to the general public. And that literally makes me crazy. It does it, and something's got to give. So the only thing I can think of, Alfred, is we need to get as many people as we can together. We need, Stephen's doing the million facts on DCI, which is an admirable thing, and I tell him all the time I wish him the best on it, even though I don't think the government's going to ever disclose. We need more than that. We need the million people in D.C., or the 2 million people. 2 million people show up on Capitol Hill, somebody's going to start finding answers for something just to get the people to go home.
Well, now, here's a very interesting development which I've been covering, and there are a few articles that your listeners may want to read also. And that is that on November 27th, the city of Denver, Colorado, received over 10,000 valid signatures on a petition to set up an extraterrestrial affairs commission with very extensive powers. And they've set up a vote for August 10th, 2010. It'll be one of the, this is done under the initiative power, which is essentially one of the reforms brought in during the progressive era from 1880 to the 1920s, and if a citizen wants to get a law passed, essentially, if you can qualify a law to go on the electoral ballot by a certain number of signatures, and if you're if then at the election a majority of the voters approve it, the voters have approved the law. And on August 10th, 2010, for the first time in history that we can find, the voters of Denver, Colorado can have the opportunity to create an extraterrestrial affairs commission with very extensive powers to provide detailed information about the presence of extraterrestrial civilizations and their vehicles to the city government and to city personnel. And to the public. They'll be doing this via a website, which will be available to all the world, to develop diplomatic protocols for interaction, to develop safety and other information for the people, It's a very broad-based commission with 7 members. Each member will have to have a different qualification in terms of medical doctor. All of them have to have at least 5 years experience in the extraterrestrial field, or published a book, or have a degree.
Yeah, I told Peckman I went on there.
I'm sorry?
I said, I told Jeff I went on there. I said, I'm the only one with the degrees in ufology to actually investigate UFOs. All these UFO investigators crack me up. Ain't none of them got the credentials to do it. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Now, the Los Angeles Times ran a poll, an online poll, asking people whether they wanted their city officials to prepare for extraterrestrial contact with a similar extraterrestrial affairs commission. And the poll, when we ran this article about a week ago, was 69% yes.
Oh, I'm moving to Cali. I'm moving to Cali. I'm going to be a UFO guy and own a pot farm. All right, I'm happy now. Sorry, go ahead. I couldn't resist.
So that is a case where a visionary colleague of ours, Jeff Peckman, who's had some successful experience with the initiative power under the laws of Colorado, has taken this and done an end run around the whole federal machinery of Department of Defense, CIA, alphabet agencies, White House, State Department, NASA, National Academy of Sciences, NSA, and said, hey, we have a sovereign entity here under municipal law. The citizens of Denver, Colorado have the sovereignty under the Constitution to pass a law and can declare that there's an extraterrestrial presence based on scientific evidence. So if the stars are with this election, and if the voters approve, we've got at least one government sanctioned entity.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was talking with Jeff about this in D.C. last year, and we actually had the same plane coming back into Tampa as we were waiting to come in New Orleans, and we discussed this some more. He said that Louisiana set up the same way, and we should be able to do it here. So I told him if I ever get any free time, I would like to get him and maybe 1 or 2 other people and see if we could put it on the ballot here in Baton Rouge or in New Orleans. And because he said it was the same type of government here that's in Colorado. And
exactly.
Because he said there's only a few states that you can do this in. He said this was one of them. And I was kind of like,
amazing.
That's interesting. That it, to me, was really, really interesting. I haven't really had time to do it. I'm going to get Linda to get him back on the show since I haven't talked to him since, I talked to him about 3 months after D.C. That was the last time I talked to him. I like Jeff. I think he's a nice guy. I enjoy him. He's a lot of fun. Plus, he's like, 9 foot tall. See, he's another tall white. Andrew and Jeff Peckman, I know 2 tall whites. I'm just telling you. Okay? In case y'all didn't know, these are tall whites running loose on our planet. If y'all don't believe me, when y'all see him, you'll know.
Yeah, but, this is going to be, for your listening audience, this is August 10th, 2010. This is the most important election on the planet in 2010. Forget about the midterm elections. That's just business as usual. This is for the Extraterrestrial Affairs Commission of Denver, Colorado. Everybody should contact their friends, relatives, their networks in Denver, Colorado, and get them to go out and vote yes for the establishment of the Extraterrestrial Affairs Commission. If there's something that we can do in the UFO exopolitics community between now and August 10th in 2010, is to get that, is to win that election and get that law passed.
Well, I posted out an email earlier, about a week ago. I need to get a hold of Jeff because I wanted to see when the election was being held.
Yeah.
Because I had talked with Angela Joyner about going up to Denver to meet Stan Romanek.
Right.
And I was thinking I would kill two birds at one stone. If the election was going on around the same time, I could be there to get the results of the elections live and put it on the air live.
Right.
And talk with Stan, because, I've got a lot of mixed reviews on Stan, and I've never really met the guy, and I've only talked to him in passing. I'm not going to pass judgment if he's a real contactee or not, or if he's had MILAB or not, until I actually physically meet him. And I don't want to meet him on the road or at a conference because, a couple of people that's met him said, oh, nothing's happened. But when I talked to Alejandro Rojas and Paula Harris and two other people that we know, other ufologists that's been to his homes, they've said they've all had experiences while at his house.
Wow.
So I figure if we're going to nip this in the butt and find out if he's telling the truth or not, we might as well set up a thing with him, come up and see him, do a little filming, do a little audio, and analyze some of the photo work and see what we come up with. Because I got to honestly say, from the photos I've seen on the internet, I'm not, it's not me on. I'm kind of like, no, this
borderline.
Yeah. So, but before I make that judgment, because, I heard, like James Carrion came down on him pretty hard. And I mean, if you judge it by the video you see on the internet, it looks like a fake. At least to me, it does. But, why, but when I've talked to him, he sounds legitimate. So I figure, why not just go? And then we can kill two birds in one stone.
No. But by going to the Extra Campaign website, I think it's www.extracampaign.org, which is Jeff Peckman's website, which is the campaign which is actually now educating the voters. And they are getting some big-time press. Like, there's a feature article on the initiative in Harper's Magazine. You can't get any better mainstream magazine than that.
It's pretty good press.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is whether or not all of this mainstream media, from Los Angeles Times, Harper's Magazine, Tonight Show, all of that, whether that's going to translate to votes on the ground on Election Day, November 10th,
It'll help.
2010. Yeah.
What he needs, and Stephen Bassett and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago when he was on the show.
Yeah.
What he needs is $20,000 or $30,000 to run some heavy TV ads the week prior to the election. If he could do it, it's a good chance that he could get this passed. Because, people may laugh and scoff about this, but when you're in a voting booth, you're all alone and it's private. And nobody knows what you vote for. Yeah. So I'm thinking that most people, a good chunk of the people, will vote yes because no one will know that they're voting yes. But if they don't know about it, they're not going to vote for it. It's like anything else. Right. You have to inform the public of what's going on. So I'm really thinking, if somebody out there that's listening to the show tonight that could help out Jeff with this, I know we always ask for donations, and, the station can always use donations because we got all kind of stuff we need. But in this case, if you could help out Jeff with this, it's a good idea, because for anybody that's interested in this field or works in this field like Alfred and I do, this is a very beneficial thing for us if this does take off, because first off, it will allow for it to happen in other states. You'll get more official people involved, and you may be able to start pressuring the government from underneath. Now, let me be clear about this, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to take more than pressure to get Uncle Sam to give up secrets, and there's two reasons why. One, if E.T. has not felt it fit to tell us the truth, why would the government supersede the aliens' wishes? That's number one. That's one of the most important things. Number two, why would the government give up its advantages it has on the rest of the world based on the technologies it's getting? And remember, the government's not developing these technologies. They're giving it to companies like Boeing and Microsoft and Lockheed and other companies to develop this technology, which in turn is creating jobs and helping advance our technologies all the way around. So there has to be a really good reason for them to take this away from these big companies, cause all these problems with all their friends in the administrations, and hack ET off at the same time. Frankly, right now, we have not given the government the reason to do this. And the only reason they will do this is if enough Americans just say we have had enough and we want to know the truth. But they're not going to tell us until we stand up and force the issue. And this is the first step in forcing the issue, getting this election won. Okay, I was on a rant there, Alfred. Sorry.
No. That's a very insightful one, and I think, Joe, you expressed it very, very well. and this panel, I tell you, this panel is drawing worldwide attention.
Yeah.
I've been on because I'm Spanish speaking. There are a lot of Spanish speaking networks in Mexico and throughout Latin America asked me to come on and explain this. And over the past couple of weeks, I've actually gone on some of our mutual friends' radio and television networks in Mexico and in Latin America, and I've taken the text of the Denver, Colorado law, which Jeff wrote, which is a beautiful document, about 3 or 4 pages long, single space, and I've actually read it and translated it out on the air in Spanish. And they are so blown away that Denver's trying to do this, that they want to bring it down to their areas, where they'll have what they call a plebiscite to form commissions in South America, because they have tremendous UFO flaps there. This model where local populations in the cities, where you're going to have accountability with a city council and with a mayor and with local voters in a municipal election, maybe that's the way to go, to have some channels where we can get some official information and research that the ufological and exopolitical and extraterrestrial research community has been developing with whistleblowers, with technical data like from the Stereo spacecraft, and begin to give it a context of a sovereign government like a municipal government, which is as sovereign as the federal government, as any state government. It's all under the Constitution. I mean, and it's all official. So Jeff Peckman has really has brought something which has, I think, a tremendous potential to be an official channel of for all of our data, for all of our science, to come in a format that's official.
Ah, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking to see when this, while I was listening to you, I was looking up to see when this ballot initiative was going to come up. Denver ballots in August of 2010, guys. So I know we got a lot of people in Denver listening. Get out there and vote. Sorry about that. I had to spit that out too. I know we get out of time here. Any parting words? We get out of here this evening, or?
I think 2010 is our flat-out year.
I like.
I think if there's going to be disclosure, we can't create it, and we should just go. I mean, we've been doing it, but we should just go flat out in 2010 for disclosure.
Well, we need to do something, because I'm ready to get a paid job. I'm tired of spending money on this. I want a paid UFO job. You'll hear that, ladies and gentlemen, paid UFO job. No, I'm really hoping something gives. Every day that Obama's in office, though, I think it's less and less of a chance that it's happening. I don't think he's going to be the. I don't think they trust him enough to tell him. Is what the problem is. I really don't. And we had this discussion with several ufologists. Most of them agree with me. There's probably not been a Democratic president briefed on ET since JFK. They really think the only two presidents that have been briefed since JFK is Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. And they think George Bush was briefed before he became president, and he briefed Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan is the only president that ever came out. Come on, he instituted Pine Gap and Star Wars and the HARP facility, all three under his regime. Plus, he gave 6 different speeches when he talked about extraterrestrials invading the planet. You got to wonder about that. You really do. I mean, he knew something, and he was definitely planning on it. And And Pine Gap, which is one of the most interesting facilities ever to exist, Pine Gap is a joint military facility or a joint covert ops facility between the United States and England. Its goal is the defense of the United States from outer space. We're defending outer space, guys. And they're meaning beyond the moon. So apparently there's some reason that they built this big facility with all these telescopes and all these radars.
It just in a parting thing, I'm chairman of the Mars Anomaly Research Society. You can go to projectmars.net. Our president has met with 3 Martian astronauts at Curtiss Wright Air Force Base with his father, who was a CIA contractor. He met them in 1971. They were on a liaison visit with the CIA from Mars, talking about a joint defense posture of the solar system with Earth. So all of this is going on, and we just remember that Mars, along with Earth, is part of the joint defense posture, and go to projectmars.net.
Guys, y'all got that? Most of these links can either be found on our sites or on Alfred's sites. They're pretty easy to find. I know Alfred's still linked from our site, so y'all can link straight in from UFO Undercover. Also, David, who is our webmaster, went ahead and put up the 2010 X Conference banners on all 3 of the major sites, so y'all can link in straight from that way as well. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to wish Eve Largen, yeah, I've seen him a little while ago, David, thank you. I want to wish Eve Largen happy birthday. I meant to I sent you an extra day the other day. There are a lot of Aquariuses out there that are in this field, by the way. That kind of cracks me up a little bit. I noticed a lot of my fellow ufologists happen to share a birthday near mine, so that's interesting. Doesn't mean anything, but it's interesting. And to the 2 people who just IN'd me, yes, Alfred is a local guy. He's not local anymore, but he was local, meaning that he's local from Kuyon land. Somebody kept asking me if you were local. He went to Jesuits, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a local, you should know what that is. If not, you don't need to know. Alfred, again, man, thanks for being on. You're great as usual.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll catch up with you somewhere this year along one of the conferences. If you get out to D.C., let me know. I'm going to try to get up there this year because I wasn't going to go this year, but somebody told me we're not going to have the Ozark conference this year, which kind of depressed me a little bit. And for a while there, it wasn't looking like we were going to have the S conference. And you know, the conferences are getting way down these days. There seems to be less.
I just like to make a brief thought. We are now in the process of organizing the first Latin American exopolitics conference, which may be occurring in October in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
That would be an interesting. I got relatives down in Argentina.
So we'll be keeping you posted.
Yeah, keep me posted. Let me know what's up. We'll get it up on the site. Let people know about it. We actually have a fairly decent audience in South America. I should say Central and South America because we have a large audience there. Because Mexico, is like, to me, I consider Mexico like part of the United States, just like I do Canada. So I get in trouble for this all the time. But I'm sorry, guys. Sooner or later, we're going to annex Canada and Mexico. It's just a matter of time. Well, you heard about this recently, right? I don't know if they're playing it up much in Canada, but they're wanting to do a joint currency between the United States, Canada, Mexico.
That has been the talk of Canada for the past 2